So we were talking about the cultural difference between the Western culture and Eastern culture. So in Western country, what happened is there is a low context culture, but as compared to Eastern country, it has context culture. We'll be discussing more about it in further slides, right? So in Western culture, they proclaim value through relationships based on marketing and business practices. But in Eastern country, relationship involves long time family ties or direct referrals from close to friends. Western culture likes to eat dry or heavy food like pizzas, burger, chocolates, where Eastern culture not much like all these types of food, right? They believe in simple eating. The next is during conversation they get close to each other. But getting close to each other is considered as inappropriate in Eastern culture. We'll be talking more about the difference between these two cultures. So when we talk about sharing the ideas, in Western culture, sharing ideas or giving direction to people usually used to be loud or more aggressive or more assertive. So Western culture, like people in Western culture, use a loud, aggressive, and assertive direction for sharing ideas or thoughts, right? But in Eastern culture, they share ideas or suggestions. They speak very softly and in a more passive manner. Right, they are more like humble in Eastern culture. What is said is more important than what is not said. So, in Western culture, is what is said is most important, is considered most important than what is not said. So, as compared to the Eastern culture, what is not being said carry more meaning than what is said because we have to interpret the inferences, like why the people is not speaking, what was the reason behind it, why he is not giving his responses or suggestions or opinions. Because if somebody is totally silent, is not speaking something, that means they are having much stuff within themselves which they are not communicating. So in Eastern culture, they carry more important to that part. So they focuses more emphasis on the things which is not being said. The next is Canada. In Canada, in United States and Australia, they focuses on individual development. When we talk about individual development, they only focuses on their own personal development as an individual. But as compared to America, Japan, Saudi Arabia, they focuses on group development. Where group development means they try to develop not only their own self, but also they develop the people who are into their teams or who are in their groups. So basically, they want to develop the people around their self. But in Canada, United States, and Australia, they only focus on self and individual development, right? Now we'll be talking about what are the blocks to cultural communication, or we can say what are the barriers or differences to cultural communication. So here are some common blocks we'll be discussing. So number one is language difference. So what language differences are there? We'll be talking one by one. Number one is literal translations. Literal translations here means the words or phrases that don't have direct equivalence in other language. That means if somebody had some statement or has used some words, but that doesn't have the translation in other, that word is not having the similar word in other languages, it might create some confusion. So that is the meaning of literal translations. Now coming to idioms and slangs. cultural specific expression may be understood. Suppose I already mentioned that slangs in Western culture is happily accepted, but here in Indian culture, it's sometimes misunderstood. So there may be languages differences using idioms and slangs also, right? The next is accents and dialects. What accent we are using, what dialects we are using. So variations in pronunciations can make comprehension difficult. Like the pronunciation of Indians are different as compared to Japanese, Chinese, and Korean people, right? So the accent and dialects can make a difference or can create a huge difficulty in comprehending or in understanding the things, right? The next is non-verbal misinterpretation. That means the non-verbal misinterpretation here means we are talking about the gestures, the facial expressions, the body language. If the words are not going with your body language, or if your words are not going with your facial expression, then things will misinterpret, or it might create some confusion, or it might create some misunderstanding between the people either in the organization or at a social place, right? So non-verbal cues such as hand movements, facial expressions, and body language can have different meanings in different culture. As we have seen in the previous slide, that when there was an image of this, so it was considered as okay in Japan, insult in Brazil, and other interpretations in the different country, right? So here the gestures might contain different meanings in different culture, right? The other is personal space. Different culture have varying norms about acceptable physical distance between people during conversation. The personal space, or we can say here non-verbal study, the proxemics we are talking about. The proxemics is the study of the distance or the space between the people. So the personal space we are talking about that how much physical distance is acceptable between the two people in an organization while conversation. If two people are conversating in an organization, they are having some conversations. So what is the personal distance? What is the physical distance between those people? Is known as proxemics. So in different cultures, there are different norms about what are the acceptable physical distance between the people who are doing the conversation, right? Moving to the next block, assumptions and stereotypes. Here, we'll be discussing the meaning of both. Like when we talk about assumptions and stereotype, the first comes is the prejudice. Preconceived notions. We say assumptions. We have already made some assumption before talking to that particular person or before going to a particular place. We have already made some assumptions that this person might be having this sort of attributes, or that place will be not be that place might not be containing a very good and healthy environment. So all these are the preconceived notions about another culture, or we can say that American culture is not good. We have made a preconceived notions. We don't have any evidence about it, or we haven't studied about it. We haven't experienced it. So that is known as assumptions. You have made it on your own. So it might sometimes lead to misunderstandings and biased communications. When we talk about stereotypes, so stereotypes here means that you are judging a person on a general opinion, right? For example, like pink color is for girls and blue color is for boys. This is a stereotype. Now we have to break that stereotype. It is not like acceptable everywhere. A boy or a man may wear a baby pink color shirt, so it doesn't mean that that color is only made for a female, right? So these are the stereotypes, or we can say the females are only made for a household chores. So these things are, we can say these are the general statements upon which we are judging people, the entire people. So these are the stereotypes which might create some misunderstanding, right? So coming to the next is ethnocentrism. Ethnocentrism is that the belief that one's own culture is superior to others can create barriers. Like for example, when somebody say that my culture is superior to yours, so that is something which might create misunderstanding, or at many point of time it might create a good huge dispute also, a good conflict also. So it can create a barrier to an open communication, right? We have to respect every religion, every culture, and because the every culture and every religion hold its own importance, right, for their own people. So then next is cultural norms and etiquettes. Now we'll be discussing about cultural norms and etiquettes. What is that? Formality. Number one is formality. Level of formality in communication vary across culture. For instance, some culture value directness while others prefer indirect communication. Right. So next is respect and hierarchy. How respect is shown and the role of hierarchy can influence communication style, right? As discussed in Japan, people bow to show respect. In India, we like join our hands to show respect to our elders, or we touch the feet to show the respect. So there are different styles of communication, right? What are the next blocks? Cultural context. As the topic for today's discussion is culture, so I will be talking the cultural context of of the communication as a barrier. High context versus no context. When we talk about high context culture rely on implicit communication and non-verbal cues. Non-verbal cues here means the body language, facial expression, gestures, whereas no context culture depend on explicit verbal communication. Your explicit verbal communication means either it will be in oral form or it will be in a written form, right? So next is emotional expressiveness. Emotional expressiveness here means the display rules and the listening styles. Sorry, the display rules. So different culture have different norms for expressing emotions, which can lead to misinterpretation. Yes, different people have different cultures, and uh, according to the different culture, they have different methods of expressing emotions, right? And it also depends upon the relationship between the people, that what sort of relationship is between the people to express emotions. The relationship between the subordinate and the superior will be different as compared to the siblings, or we can say compared to the friends, or parents and kids. So there it totally depends what sort of relationships you are sharing with that person, and that accordingly you express your emotions, right? So we cannot follow the uniform expression. We cannot follow the uniform method of expressing emotions everywhere, right? Next is listening style. When we talk about listening style, here comes the two types of listening: active listening and passive listening. Here, in some cultures encourage active listening with frequent interruptions and affirmations, while others value passive, uninterrupted listening. Here, active listening means if somebody is listening to a speaker actively, then he or she or the audience might have some queries, some questions. They stop and they interrupt in between and ask their queries. So that sort of listening is known as active listening. When we talk about passive listening is first they have to listen to overall content, and then after the completion, they can ask their questions or queries. Right? I hope this much is clear to you all. Moving towards the next blocks, time orientation. In some countries, punctuality, in some culture, punctuality is the strict adherence to schedule, right? So when we talk about time orientation, we talk about the punctuality. Attitudes toward time can differ. with some culture emphasizing strict adherence to the rules and others having a more flexible approach, right? In some countries, it might be flexible if somebody is asked to come at 9 o'clock or that person is coming at 9:15 or 9:30, then in some countries it might be acceptable. But in a few countries, there is a strict adherence to that particular rule, right? The next is cultural values. Here, cultural values is individualism and versus collectivism. That means we are talking about the individual priorities, the personal goals, the individual culture, or we are talking about the collective culture. We are talking about the collective group of people, so that we can maintain, achieve that goal of group harmony and group goals, right? So these are the cultural values. As we have talked that in America, they talk about individualistic values as compared to Arab countries. As in Arab countries, they talk about the collectivism, right? Next is uncertainty avoidance. Some cultures have a high tolerance for ambiguity, while others prefer clear rules and structure. When we talk about the term ambiguity, here it means that ambiguity means that there is a confusion. So some cultures have a high tolerance for ambiguity. That means they can tolerate if there is some confusion or some vague information. But in some other countries, they want clear rules and regulation. There should be no confusion in it, right? And as we are talking about communication, the rule of communication states that every information and every thought which we are exchanging or which we are transmitting should state a crystal clear information. There should be no hidden information because we are talking in terms of profession. So when we are talking in terms of business communication, every information must be crystal clear to the receiver or to the person whom you are sending, whether it is on email or it is over the telephone call or it is over the video conferencing. What sort of channel you are selecting, that is your call. But the information which you are sharing must contain the concrete, correct, and transparent message, right? Because only this will result into the effective communication. Otherwise, the barriers will be there, right? So we'll be talking about the next is contextual barriers. The contextual barriers, it contains physical environment where noisy, uncomfortable settings can hinder communication. That may be noise can be of the construction, it can be of the facilities or the generators, or apart from that, there might be some disturbance in the network, right? Anything can be the disturbance over there. So noise means the disturbance or the obstacle which come during communication using a particular channel. The next is technological barriers. When we talk about technological barriers, there is lack of access or familiarity with the technology. That means an individual is not familiar of how to use in technology or is not able to access it just because of lack of skills, or he or she might not got the desired training for that, right? So these also can act as a barrier because nowadays in a present scenario, communication and technology both are equally important, as we have discussed in the previous lecture, that what is the role of technology in communication. You might have got the idea from that, that technology and communication is equivalently important, right? So all these things, if overcome, can like if all the blocks of the cultural communication are taken care of, then it might result into cultural sensitivity, open-mindedness, and a willingness to learn and adapt to the changes. Right? We'll be moving towards the next slide. Now, how we'll be talking about how we can implement the effective cultural communication. As till now, we have studied what is culture, what are the examples of culture, what are the characteristics, what are the elements which constitute a culture, and what are the cultural differences between different nations, what are the blocks to the cultural communication, and now we'll be talking about how to overcome those barriers and implement an effective cultural communication. So, here are some steps, or we can say there are few strategies which we can use to improve our cultural communication. Number one is develop your cultural awareness. Obviously, we must develop our own awareness regarding the cultures. Like before communicating with people from different backgrounds, it's essential to develop an understanding of their cultural norms, values, and beliefs. This can be achieved through research, reading, and talking to people from different cultures. Right? We can develop awareness only by talking to people uh, in our surrounding, in our environment, and to know more about their values, beliefs, and also we must learn to respect their culture, right? Next is adapt your communication style. People from different culture may have different communication style. It may include non-verbal cues, use of language and tone, like the tone of the people also affect the cultural communication, right? So we have to take care of our facial expressions, our body language, our pitch, our tone of our voice. So we can say voice modulation must be taken care of while doing a conversation. To communicate effectively, you should adapt your communication style to the cultural context, right? Next is avoid assumptions and stereotypes. When we say avoid assumptions, that means we have to, we have to forget about all the preconceived notions and assumptions. Instead, we have to approach communication with an open mind and a willingness to learn more about others' culture, right? Next is practice active listening. Here, active listening involves paying attention to what other person is saying, asking, clarifying questions, and showing empathy. Empathy here means to putting yourself into the shoes of others, to keeping yourself into the other situation and then deciding what you would have done, right, instead of that person. So this approach can help building trust and understanding. Next is use clear and concise language. When communicating across cultures, it's essential to use clear and concise language. Clear and concise language means the language should be easy to understand, should be easy to interpret by the receiver, right? Avoid using slangs, jargons, or technical terms that may not be understood by the other person. Or you must know to whom you are communicating. You must see the understanding level, uh, the knowledge of that particular person to whom to whom you are creating a message or to whom you are communicating. Here, jargons means the technical terms which are used by expert. It is basically technical term which an expert use. It is not understand by the common man, right? The technical experts can understand the technical jargons. Be patient and respectful. Cultural communication take time and patience. So be respectful, have patience for the others, try to avoid getting frustrated and try to understand instead of misunderstanding. Right? Listen more, speak less. Try to be a good listener also. Because communication is not only about speaking, you have to be an active and a good listener, right? The next point is seek feedback and learn from mistakes. When we say seek feedback and learn from mistakes, we are talking that we have to seek feedback means we want that there should be a feedback from others regarding what we have said to them. And then we have to realize that what mistakes have been done from my part and then try to eliminate or overcome those mistakes and improve your communication skills for the future, right? We'll be now discussing about the relevance. What is the relevance of cultural communication in business organizations? So let's see. First, relevance you're saying here is the importance. Why we are talking about culture in business communication? What is the relevance of it? Why it is important to include cultural factor in communication? As we are talking about business organization, business communication. So business is not like confined to a particular nation or to a particular state. When we are doing business, it might go cross-cultural boundaries. We will be doing collaborations with different nations, or we will be expanding our business. If we are going to expand our business in different nations, we might uh, face all these problems. So it's better to learn about cross-cultural differences, cross-cultural communication. It will help you in business dealings with international clients, or we can say foreign clients, right? So let's see what is the first relevance. The first point is it helps to promote cultural awareness and understanding. When people communicate across cultural boundaries, they are exposed to different ways of thinking, behaving, and perceiving the world. That means they have the exposure to their perception, their behavior, and their thinking level. So they can excel all these three elements of their personality: the perception, the behavior, and the thinking skills, right? So this can help to break down stereotypes, reduce prejudice, and promote tolerance and respect for cultural diversity, right? Here again, we are saying to break down stereotypes. Break down stereotypes here means to break down the general opinions, uh, or we can say preconceived notions on which you are making judgments, right? Like as we are talking, like fat people can't dance. So this is a general stereotype that if somebody is overweight or somebody is very much healthy, then he or she cannot dance. Or pink is for girls, blue is for boys, or females are made for household chores. So all these things are stereotypes. So we have to break all these things and have to keep our mind open to accept new things. And to accepting new, you have to wash out the preconceived notions or the assumptions, right? And we have to open our mind to learn new things. So, after if we inculcate this habit of exposure and learning new things, we can respect the cultural diversity, right? Now, coming to the second point, the second point says cultural communication is essential for business and trade. Why? I already mentioned that if we are talking about business communication, business is not confined to a particular nation. We will be talking about the diversification of our business, the expansion of our business. So it might possible, it will be the process to expand into different countries, to collaborate with different clients, so as to increase your customer base, increase your commercial benefit, and to make your global presence, right? So in today's global economy, business must be able to communicate effectively with partners, clients, and customers from diverse cultural groups. Failure to do so can lead to misunderstanding, miscommunication, and lost business opportunities, right? So we have to respect the diverse cultural backgrounds of our business partners, of our business clients, and also of our uh, foreign customers, or we can say customers from different countries. We'll be talking about the next relevance. The third cultural communication relevance is that it is crucial for international diplomacy and cooperation. In an increasingly interconnected world, countries must be able to communicate effectively to address global challenges such as climate change, terrorism, and economic inequality. So, we must focus on cooperation and address the global challenges so as to reduce or overcome all these inequalities and issues. The next is cultural communication is essential for promoting cultural awareness and understanding. And it also facilitates business and trade, promotes international diplomacy and cooperation. So these are the effective strategies. If we can implement into our business, we can overcome the cultural communication issues. I hope this session was helpful for you. Meet you in the next session. Thank you so much.